Saga Podcast.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the arenas of Star Wars Unlimited. We are the Space Arena Ground Arena podcast. I'm Dan, KennedyHawk, one of your hosts. We've got everybody here today. We've got MrBen. How's it going?
Hey, it's great to see everybody. Happy to be here with the full crew.
Yeah, I finally made it back. We've also got Josh or BananaCrapshoot. How's it going?
What's up? I hope everybody pulls up their socks and grabs their crotch because we're going for a ride today.
All right. All right. Well,
I'm adjusting my socks. Hang on.
yeah. I'm not wearing socks right now. It's like 112 in Albuquerque, and it's really hot. It's gross. Dry heat eventually is just Tatooine heat. I'm just going to be honest.
Your trash can's melting outside yet?
No,
soft
but I
and
did
pliable.
I stepped in some of like that black tar that they fill in the parking lots at work today, and it was literally like tar. I thought that it was going to be fine, and it was not. It was bad. But that's okay.
That's rough.
I don't
man.
have any footwear on. But what's everybody been doing since the last show? You all got together and talked about some spoilers. Anybody been playing anything fun? Not Unlimited yet, but maybe someday.
I finally got my Kickstarter for the Sorcery TCG fulfilled. For anybody who didn't follow Sorcery, it's one guy's kind of passion project. It was on Kickstarter a couple years ago. It's heavily influenced by like the early stages of Magic with an emphasis on like really beautiful cards, and you play with the cards actually on a field. So there's 20 spots that can exist, and you have one deck that spawns locations into these spots where you can then play your units, which come out of your other deck. So it's a little different from your typical TCG in quite a few ways, mechanics as well as art, but man, finally fulfilled like a year after it was supposed to. And that's what's captured my imagination for the last week or so.
Nice. I played that a couple of times. I think they had like a demo on Tabletop Simulator. It was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Banana?
I've been playing the DC Dual Force open beta for the digital card game. That's pretty enjoyable so far. Like, it's very limited what you can do because it is still in beta, so they don't have like all, the stuff turned on. So you can play against the AI. You can play unranked matches, which is how you can earn coins to buy packs. And then there's like one comic, which is a cool feature they have, so you can play through comics in the DC universe, and those, when you finish them, will reward you with cards and coins towards packs and stuff as well. So I enjoy the gameplay of that, and I've been having fun with that. So
Nice.
yeah. What
I've
about
still
you?
been hitting up Shatterpoint pretty hard. We had one tournament for that locally. I phased out of One Piece for a little bit because the OP2 meta was pretty brutal. But the third set came out, and our store championships this weekend, and Gen Con's in 2 weeks, so I like hit that full force again. So that's been a wild ride, learning how to play a game that you gave up for 2 months and seeing that everyone in the meta like converged to one deck. So it's pretty fun when you roll in with the counter deck, not realizing what's going to happen, but probably made everybody else a little irritated. So we've got our store championship on Saturday, and then we leave for like our 3-week road trip vacation that ends with Gen Con. So this is like my last chance to play with the locals before hitting the big kids up. So hopefully it works out okay.
So are you
Good luck,
playing
man.
Are you playing in a One Piece event at Gen Con?
Yeah, there's a couple of us from the locals are all going to be there. So Thursday there's like a regional, and then Friday there's a new format. It's called Buddy Battles. So it's like a 2 versus 2 format where you can like interact with your allies board, but you can't defend for your ally, but you can like play events to help them out. And there's some weird rules with it. But yeah, it's like a new 2v2 format, and they're doing a whole like 7-round tournament with that. So we're going to do Buddy Battles on Friday, and then Thursday I've got reserved to do the regional and then some Star Wars Unlimited demos.
Cool. Anything else
Should be
exciting happen at Gen Con?
Not really. Not, I mean, games come out, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I'm
not
technically
much
signed
going
up for
on
that
there.
versus tournament, but it's at the same time as another one, so we'll see. If I drop out of One Piece fast enough, I can make the versus tournament.
Are you going to pick up your copy of the AEW Wrestling 200 card set while you're there?
I'm a Marvel person. I am a Marvel fanboy, so I tolerate Buffy and aliens and things existing in the game that I love. And I don't know how far I can stretch it into WrestleMania or whatnot, but we'll see.
It,
Maybe
it's kind of weird, right? Like a
it's
little weird.
It is weird. Like the boys definitely fits into that, right? A little better. And
yeah.
like Mortal Kombat even too does a little better, I think, than wrestling's kind of off the wall. But I mean,
I mean, they're both
you could
completely
think of.
fictional, so it's like I get it.
I mean, you could
And
almost think
people
of
in
that as,
spandex.
if you wanted to, you could think of the AEW wrestling one as like its own thing, right? And you play it like if you ever had, a hankering to play some Raw Deal,
Some
maybe,
wrestling.
maybe, maybe instead of Raw Deal, you play AEW.
I have actually gone and done research on AEW specifically because the versus cards were coming out. I was like, I want to know something about these characters, so I've watched like YouTube like synopsises of the various like story arcs, and it's just so silly. It's like I get that people love it, and I'm happy for them. Like God bless. There's things that I love that are silly too, but man, wrestling does not resonate with me. I'm still buying those versus cards though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got to get that one of a kind chair.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Billy Butcher needs, is a chair to crack somebody with.
Well, that's Comic Land. We're going to talk about a completely real thing that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars Unlimited, right? That's what we're here to talk about today. So we've got an exciting show with a couple topics. I think first we're going to talk about the announcements that have come out about the uniqueness rule. So we'll have a little conversation about that. And then we'll go over some of the other recently spoiled cards to talk about our opinions on those, our hot takes, our cold takes, or our lunch lady lukewarm takes. And then we'll wrap up with some listener questions. So let's go over uniqueness. Anybody want to give us the rundown on what the uniqueness rule is, how it works, and some things like that?
Sure. I can give like a brief what the rule is. So the way the uniqueness rule in Star Wars Unlimited works is if you have two cards with the same name, right? So if you have two Luke Skywalkers and they have different subtitles, you can have them both in play at the same time. So you can have two Lukes in play, but you cannot have two copies of the same Luke in play. So that's essentially the uniqueness rule. And I will say, just to kick off kind of the conversation on what our thoughts are on it, initially when I first heard it, I hated it, right? But then after listening to Tyler's reasoning and the process they went through and how they got to the rule the way they got to it, I'm on board with it. And I think it's fine. Thematically, it doesn't fit what we've been used to with the Star Wars games. But like I said, after listening to Tyler's reasoning, I think it's probably the better choice.
I'm curious why they didn't just go all the way. If you're gonna, to me, uniqueness is a thematic mechanic. So if we're going to throw out the theme as being sort of the overriding reason to have that mechanic, it makes me wonder, like, why have it at all? I suppose the argument against that position would be if each individual Luke, you can only have one at a time, they can maybe push the power level on these named characters a little bit. And that's why they're limiting them in this very narrow way. I don't care that much. This is probably not the rule that the way I would have written it, but I'm not upset about it. I don't think it ruins the theme. It's more or less fine. I'm pretty lukewarm on the decision, although,
I actually really liked it. The first thing I thought of when I saw leaders and characters is, like, let's say Chewbacca is my favorite Star Wars character, and there's an amazing Chewbacca leader, but there's also like an essential 2-drop that is Chewbacca that every heroism deck should run. I'd be really frustrated because I want to play the leader that's my favorite character, but I also couldn't put that unit onto the field because they'd be a leader card somewhere else. So I like the idea that like you can play units with the same name, and that's kind of that person jumping all around the battlefield. I've seen so many Star Wars scenes, especially in Clone Wars and the prequels, right, where people are jumping all over the battle and doing things. And I mean, sometimes it makes sense to me that someone would get 2 swings in when someone else would get 1. So there's already like a level of some kind of abstraction in this game, right? It's not perfect simulation. I'm not literally picking up blasters and shooting at the cards. So why not stretch it a little bit further and let people play with their favorite characters, right? So I like it. I think it limits deck building less, and I think it encourages you to be able to play with whatever you open. But I do worry that like people aren't going to know that unless they find that rule in the learn to play or somewhere like really obvious that sticks out to them. I can imagine a lot of veteran card gamers, the first time I'm playing Luke as my leader and I play a Luke unit, they're going to be like, what are you doing? That's an illegal deck. And I'll be like, actually, if you read the rules, not to be that guy, but...
So the for Ben, the balance, having the ability, the balancing availability to push those cards was one of the examples they gave on doing that. And they said that like if you can only have one Luke in your deck, then the only Luke you're gonna play is like the best one. So then like the rest of the Luke cards don't matter. And it makes, you know, the other Lukes worse. So this was a way that since you can only have one of that one card in play, you can kind of push the abilities or the balance on it. So doesn't create a broken deck. That was one of the reasons they gave.
And it should make those like... Oh, go for it.
I was going to say, in old verses, you had the kind of the first problem we talked about, where you could only have one Batman in play. You had to draw him, and then you couldn't play any other ones, and it kind of made all the other ones worse, et cetera, et cetera. And then in new verses, you have this main character. So you're able to have your favorite character in play, but because you've got the main character version, therefore you can't play the supporting character version. And that kind of, there's definitely some cards that have stayed in my binder because I like one version or the other better. So I'm willing to go on this ride. And I sort of feel like if the overriding concern is to free up deck building as much as possible, like let's just ditch uniqueness altogether. But they say they're going to use that as a way to like push the powers on these cards and then throttle them in terms of how often they can get into play. Okay, cool. Like if it actually plays out that way in the cards, sure, that sounds fun to me. I'm okay with it.
I think it lets them make cooler supporting cards too, right? Like we looked at Vader's lightsaber from one of the previews, and it did something special when it's played on Vader. Well, if I can stack my deck with extra Vaders, now I don't have to rely so heavily on drawing into a Vader and then drawing into a lightsaber. I still have to do that, but if I can have 9 Vaders in my deck at various different costs, and then be able to more consistently get that like bonus trigger, that can be really cool. At the same time, like it also puts a lot of stress on balance, right? If these characters aren't pushed in the way you're talking about, or if like let's say there's a 1-drop Vader and now that lightsaber becomes like an amazing auto kill item on turn 2 or 3, they're going to have to be really careful with the costs of these iconic characters and like how it plays into their supporting kit. But it lets them do cool things like make events that are like quotes of a character that require you to have that character in play, because now it doesn't only associate with like the leader because you're guaranteed to have them. You can like build a deck around a character or theme, which should be fun. I also think it helps draft, right? And the whole idea of unlimited is do unlimited things. I agree with what Ben said. Like, why have uniqueness if it's not truly unique? But we'll see how that goes.
And I think the one thing that Tyler kept going back to when he talked about this for like 20, 25 minutes was they tried various versions of uniqueness and they went with the one that the gameplay was better. So, I mean, I think that's fine if the gameplay is really better. And like So something you brought up that I think we maybe want to touch on, because this has become a meme now, especially in the community Discord, the 8 Vaders, right? Like everybody's going to have
Okay.
8 Vaders. There's going to be 20 Vaders everywhere, right? So you have like the amount of mental gymnastics and the assuming that you're doing to get to that point is kind of insane to me. The point where you're going to have 8 Vaders in your deck, you're going to have a leader, and you would need 3 other regular unit copies of different Vaders to be able to have even 4 in play. So that we're assuming that you are building a deck that has the correct aspects where you're not paying for penalties for all these cards. Because at that point, I don't see how you're not going to be overpriced, right? Unless
maybe you're willing to pay maybe that's the penalty you have to pay to have 8 Vaders.
I guess, but still, and also how many how many Vaders are we getting in set 1, right? I doubt
so
it's
that's
like,
fair.
So if we get a leader in a unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long is it going to take to get to the point where you can actually build a deck that legitimately gets 8 Vaders on the field?
Well, it might take a while, and that's a fair point. But it's also fair to observe that in a way it's kind of inevitable. That what Star Wars games do is they give us a lot of variations on the marquee characters. That sells stuff. It's the stuff we want to play with. Most people aren't like me and care about Max Rebo, so we're definitely going to see more Darth Vaders. I would not be surprised if we see a Darth Vader in almost every expansion. Now, it might be a different aspect. We might have to pay aspect penalties. So it might take years before you can actually have a playable 8 Vader deck. But if the game is successful, and I think we all hope it is, eventually it's inevitable that this is going to come up. And I just don't care. I don't really see the only problem I would have with that is if what FFG is doing is actually making sure that all these unique characters are pushed. Once we get to the point where you can run 8 of these pushed characters, well, now your curve is just outstripping everything else. And now everybody has to run these like clone decks. I don't want to see that meta. I realize that's like way, 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 way far off, but that is one potential place where the design could kind of go awry. But if it's like a jank pile, it's a silly deck that people are playing for the memes just because they want to have 8 Vaders, cool, knock yourself out. Silly combos are fun. Like, I have no problem with that. And if somebody 8 Vaders ruins their like Star Wars fantasy, okay, maybe the tournament scene might not be for you if you're that uptight about what the other person's playing.
Yeah, and I mean, I used to play a lot of games that had uniqueness rule, but I'm looking through things that I play now, right? And I mean, I'm not playing Dragon Ball Super anymore, but I mean, you could make a deck of just Gokus if you wanted, right? You could probably make a deck with 50 Gokus in it. Like the Frieza deck was all about having multiple copies of the same character. In One Piece, I can get 6 copies of Luffy and have Luffy as my leader, and there's nothing that stops me from it. Nobody really is like, this isn't thematic and weird. So I don't know if it's something particular to Star Wars people wanting to have those unique characters truly unique. But when I think back to like the LCG, right, my favorite times in the LCG meta were when things did focus on like the iconic characters from Star Wars. There was like a Super Friends meta where like the main deck was Luke, Han, Chewie, and 3PO or something like that. And I don't want the main deck to be unnamed Twi'lek Smuggler #1, Jawa, and something else. Even though I love the Star Wars universe, I want to see like iconic characters hit the board. And like, if my son can make a deck with 50 versions of Chopper, he'll love it. And that's totally fine. It might be a trash deck or like a pile of broken droids, but he'll have fun with it. So I think in the unlimited theme that they've pushed, I think it's a really good idea.
Well, and to that, another point they made was that they want to push the thematic stuff to be the good stuff, and they want the unthematic stuff to be like the wacky whatever decks. So
seems fair. Overall, I'm pleased with it. I really liked, especially after I listened to Tyler's points about, they picked the thing that made the game the most fun. They picked the thing that gave the best gameplay, right? Those are the decisions I want them to be making, not we picked the thing that logically made the most sense in canon. That's something that I give very little emphasis to, at least to an extent.
Right. And like you mentioned abstraction, right? We already have like the bases are one level of abstraction. The you can cross eras, the mirror matches, right? So like, 2 units in play isn't really a big deal or stretch it when you.
So here's a question for you. Is it going to bother you if I have a Darth Vader in the ground arena and a Darth Vader Sith interceptor pilot in the space arena at the same time?
No.
Yeah, me either.
I should lay out, like, again, to sort of point to the weaknesses in my own argument here. I am a cards as widgets kind of player. I like mechanics more than anything else. Good mechanics will get me over sloppy or weak theme. I do love theme, and I think theme is kind of like the frosting on the cake, but it's not the foundation. It's not the core part of what a game needs to be good. And for the people for whom the theme is the most important part, the way they feel is totally valid too. That's totally the people who only want to play like thematic battles. Like, I wish them all the best building the decks they want to play, playing with their friends, kind of like role playing Star Wars combat. Great for them. But like at the tournament table, I'm going to play 8 Vaders if that's the meta. You know what I mean?
Do you think there could be a chance that in the future there's a format that is uniqueness rule applies to the board? You can't have 2 named characters at the same time, right?
Sure.
I mean,
Sure.
locally there
Maybe
definitely
not
will be,
sanctioned,
but yeah.
but even like a community tournament, that's like an easy format for a community event to like kind of make your event a little bit unique.
And it can shake up the
Pun
stale
not
meta.
intended.
Right.
Yeah,
If we
exactly.
If we do have that meta that's the 25 Vader deck that everyone's worried about, then you just put that rule down for a month at your local scene and everybody will try out different cards, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what formats people come up with for this, right? I already have stuff going through my head that eventually we could implement through, our Discord server. So I'm, excited to see what other people come up with.
Webcam locals. I can't wait.
Mm-hmm. The only silver lining of COVID is that everybody got comfortable playing card games over webcam. All the rest of it was total trash.
All right. Well, that was our unique opinion on uniqueness. Do we want to go to some of the recently spoiled cards next?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we've got 3 spoiler cards to look through here. And I want to give credit to the people that spoiled these cards originally. So I'm not even going to try to say the name of this ship, but there's a Liberator gunship that was on the Johto cast. So let's talk about Azatuk. Sure.
Azatuk or something.
Azatuk, Liberator gunship. So let's go through it. It's a 4-cost unit with yellow and heroism as its aspects, so it's a double aspected card. Space unit, 3 power, 4 hit points with ambush. Ambush keyword says after you play this unit, it may ready and attack an enemy unit. Pretty cool art. Pretty decent unit. I think. What does everybody else think first? What do you think, MrBen? What do you think about the Azatuk Liberator gunship?
We looked at another ship. We revealed another ship that was a 3/2 stat line for 4 that I felt pretty good about. And I think this ship slots into a very, very similar position because much like the infiltrator ship that we talked about before, what you're asking is for your opponent to have something in the space arena to target. If they do, you play this, you fly over there, smash that thing. Maybe you take a couple damage, but you kill their thing, and you end up with a 4-cost 3/2 on board after all these effects resolve. So I liked the other card. I like this card.
Josh, what do you think?
I think of the space units we've seen, it looks pretty cool. Obviously, just similar to the Imperial Interceptor. You want to have something to target with this because ambush only targets units. You can't hit the base with it, and you don't get the ready if there's not a unit in play. So if there's nothing in your opponent's side on the space arena, you play this like a normal card and it comes in exhausted. So you don't get the value if you're not, trading into something with it. But also something cool to note is this is a Wookiee ship, and it's wooden. So
Oh, that makes me want to play it even more.
Something cool.
So yeah, I'll go for it.
I was going to say it's worth noting that playing this without the extra value, just a 4-cost 3/4, does leave you in a better position than playing the Imperial Infiltrator. That leaves you with a 4-cost 3/2. So while they both kind of function in a similar way, the weakness of your opponent not giving you the setup condition impacts the 2 cards differently.
Yep.
Totally. And they're both double aspected cards, right? So I'm probably not going to pay 6 for this unit, is my guess. And I'm assuming that there's some sort of tax you're paying for ambush, right? So a 4-cost unit might normally be a 4/4 or a 3/5 or something. And part of our cost is going into that ambush keyword. That being said, we should do like an entire episode or topic on value trading and how you do trading in a game like this, unit trading. But ambush can be really powerful for unit trading, right? You're usually only going to play this if it can swing into something and live, because then your opponent also has to waste another unit or event or resource removing what's left of your Liberator gunship. Very rarely are you going to use this and swing it to something that has 4 power unless you're going to remove it and it costs more, right? But you can definitely use ambush to your advantage for value trading. I think it's a really interesting keyword because it feels like aggression, but it's more of a control thing, right? It's not come into play and be able to attack the base. It may ready and attack an enemy unit. I'm assuming if there's no enemy unit, it doesn't get to ready at all. But I haven't dug into the maze of the learn to play to sort of figure that out. But
it specifies in there that you need a unit.
Yeah. So I think if you don't have a unit, it's probably not worth the value. It's better off holding in your hand as sort of a surprise later. But that being said, if there's nothing there and you can establish a presence and your opponent's already resourced out for the turn, you may as well start building bodies, which is pretty nice. Cool ship. I'm pretty happy. All right.
I'm going to call that ship the Big Wood. So since it's wooden, whenever it gets played, I'm dropping the Big Wood. So
I also think, just as a matter of card game history, it's worth pointing out that this game learned lessons from Hearthstone. When Hearthstone first came out, they had the charge mechanic, which was basically the same as ambush, except it could go face. And then later they changed it to rush, which is basically like ambush. It's the same thing. You get to attack the turn you come out, but you can only hit units and you can't hit the base. So I definitely think there's a little bit of standing on shoulders, having learned from mistakes that took place in another card game happening here.
FFG is committing my one cardinal sin that FFG always commits. They have these reminder texts for keywords that don't fully describe or explain what the effect does to the casual observer. Right? If I played this game with one of my friends that doesn't play card games, they would think it could come into play ready and maybe attack a unit, or I could hold it back. But that's not what it does. If it's going to ready, it has to attack a unit. You can't hold it back and wait a turn and swing at base. So I really wish if they were going to have reminder text that it actually very clearly, without any ambiguity, described what the effect did. And eventually it will to all of us. But one of my cardinal sins. So the card doesn't lose points for that. That's okay. All right, next up is Rebel Pathfinder that was spoiled by Wreck and Rule. They had a blog post on this. It was a really good one, so check that out. This is a 2-cost heroism ground unit, Rebel and Trooper traded, 2 power with 3 hit points, and the Saboteur keyword. When this unit attacks, ignore Sentinel and defeat the defender's shields. So all the shields. We'll go in the same order. MrBen, what are you thinking?
Fantastic. This is the kind of words we want to see. These are the kind of keywords that we want. If Sentinel is going to be good, people are going to want ways to get around it. If you're going to be able to have more than one shield, there needs to be ways to wipe all shields, and it's all contained in the same keyword. At a 2-cost 2/3, it doesn't feel like this unit stats are being penalized very heavily for such a good combination of words that add up to be the Saboteur keyword. Seems like a solid unit if Sentinels are in your meta. In your play group at locals, if they end up being in the competitive meta, this is the kind of card you need to get around that nonsense.
All right,
I agree.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think we can expect Sentinels and Shields to be around for a long time, right? So we need, like you said, ways to get around it. But I think they need to be careful with that keyword on the power level of the cards that get attached to that keyword. Um, because if you push it too far, it could break, I think.
You're talking about Saboteur?
Yeah. If you
Yeah,
can
I agree.
completely bypass any, since you can't defend attacks, like the attacker chooses what is being attacked. As the defender, the only thing we currently know of that we have to defend our base is Sentinel and Shield. So if you can completely ignore all of those things, you got to be careful how far you pull that lever.
That's why I'm glad
I
this is
think.
on a small body, right? Because
Yeah.
you're right. The only thing we can defend with is Sentinels and Shields, and that's how we would like stop damage. But since units come into play exhausted and they can't attack until the next round, you've got a 3 health target, right? So you've got 1 round to do 3 damage to this unit to avoid that 2 damage to your base if that's going to end the game. So it's cool that swarm decks and like low cost weenie decks or whatever we're going to call them, army decks have some of this keyword that lets them bypass Sentinel, because nothing would be more annoying than like a Sentinel that's like a 2/8 that just like absorbs your entire weenie deck. But now you can bypass it and force them to waste activations removing it. So that's a really strong like ability for a swarm deck. It's also just a strong ability in general, right? Once the game gets to like that critical moment at the end where your opponent has to defend, being able to like bypass their defense can be like really threatening, right? If I play this and I know my opponent wanted to drop on curve, but by playing this they have to not drop on curve and instead worry about removing my unit, then I've messed up their game plan and possibly thrown the advantage towards me. So it can be, even if it doesn't get an attack in, a really big power play.
I think it's also notable that this does not have a general faction symbol. It just has the heroism icon. So this card is going to be a live tech option for literally all heroism affiliated leaders. This is going to be the card you put into your deck if you're on heroism and you're worried about defensive nonsense from your opponents. So it's going to be versatile. It maybe isn't doing the most damage, but between getting around Sentinels, and we already know there's cards that exist that can give attack pumps to this guy. So his 2 attack may, what was that one? Was it Cover Fire or the pay 2 cunning plus 3 attack? I mean, that's 5 reach right there.
Surprise attack or something like that. Yeah.
Surprise attack. That's the one I was thinking of. I can't memorize cards until they're in my hand. Looking at the images, they don't stick.
I think I remember that one.
But I think this card's
I'll go for it.
Going to be very versatile. And it could happen, Banana was talking about going too far with Saboteur. It could happen that if Saboteur is everywhere, then nobody plays Shields and Sentinel. But then there's no reason to play Saboteur. And then you have this sort of meta fluctuation where the Sentinel stuff comes around, and when it gets too oppressive, then the Saboteur stuff comes around. And depending upon the card pool, that we could end up with some interesting cycles between different events as people kind of react to whatever showed up at the last event. I stepped on you there, though, Dan. What were you saying?
You're fine. I was going to say the same thing, actually. So that exact same cycle happened in Digimon, right? The first set of Digimon, when that game first came out, the only thing you could do to defend is if you played a blocker unit. Most of those units were really bad at attacking. So the first thing the American meta did was they took like decks where you had 30 blockers and you just like walled up. And quickly the meta evolved into like this rush format where you were like, screw the blockers. I'm just going to put the cheapest things in that can attack, and I'm going to out attack how many blockers they have. And it's sort of like oscillated back and forth until people found, okay, here's the right number of blockers to include to force people to like be honest, but also not like overpower any like blocker bypassing and things like that. So I'd expect a similar oscillation. This card's also a common, and like you said, heroism only, so expect to see a lot of it in draft or seal, depending on how that works. Like a staple unit that has a good effect is going to be one of those like really powerful bomb units that shows up in sealed events, drafts, and pre-releases and stuff like that. Any more comments on the Rebel Pathfinder?
I'm good.
All right. We're going to move on to the Emperor's Royal Guard, a 3-cost unit on the ground. 2 icons again. I think it's green, which is, I can't remember, green something. And command, there we go. And villainy, 3 power, 4 hit points. While you control an officer unit, this unit gains Sentinel in that little red box, so kind of like a persistent effect. And while you control Emperor Palpatine as a leader or a unit, this unit gets +1 hit point. So that's pretty cool. We'll do the same order just to finish this one out. So, Mr. Ben, what are your thoughts on Emperor's Royal Guard?
3-cost 3/4 is an okay body to begin with. I don't think in Constructed you're going to put this in your deck unless you can trigger probably both of the text conditions that this card is asking of you. So you're either going to have Palpatine units that you're building your deck around, or a Palpatine leader, and you're also going to have officials to get the Sentinel. But given that it's a 3-cost 3/4, that still feels kind of playable to me. So this to me feels like a card that you might see in Sealed just because it's green. But Constructed, I'm a little, I think it's going to be really niche Constructed, but I think it still is going to have a home in Sealed because it's got a pretty good body.
Josh?
I think this card's cool. I like the design of it. I like, I like a lot of stuff about this card. Just for, if you want to reference kind of the power level of this card on other 3-drops we've seen, Yoda's a 3-drop with a 2/4 and Restore 2. And then the Cloud City Wing Guard is a 2/4 3-drop with Sentinel. So this has a conditional Sentinel, but I don't think you're putting this in the deck unless you know you're going to be able to get the Sentinel and getting the more health because you got Palp in play. Is, there's the thematic part of Star Wars right there. And I like it. I want to have it in my hand.
Yeah, I mean, theme looks good. Power level looks pretty good. Like you said, I was comparing it to the other 3-cost units, and it's better than both of them. Well, maybe a little bit more conditional, but it's also in icons that I would assume are going to have a lot of official units and a lot of maybe one of those 45 card Emperor Palpatine decks will have a couple of Royal Guards in it or something like that. But looks pretty solid. It'll depend on how important and powerful Sentinel is and how many Sentinel options you have as a choice when you're playing command villainy, right? If this is the only green-black Sentinel, then you're probably going to care a lot and then run it in a lot of decks, assuming you need Sentinel or something to defend your base. This one's a rare, so I thought that's worth pointing out. You're going to see less of this in Sealed and Draft just because it's a rare, but also like in Draft, some people like to just pick the rares, right? So you might see this decide what color someone plays.
I missed the Cell Block card. That's a 3-drop with Sentinel, Villainy aspect, and that's a 3/3. So better than that one too.
So I think a really hard thing to do in game design is to make cards that are really good and exciting, but not oppressive and not like meta deranging. So one of the levers that I think designers can use to accomplish that is by making a card that's fine by itself. Like as a Grizzly Bear 3/4 with no abilities, that's still playable. Like in Constructed, that's probably not good enough, but in Constructed, you're going to get icing on that cake. I'm not going to use that metaphor again. That's twice today. You're going to get a little bit of bonus on there where if he's going to be a Sentinel, maybe he's going to be a 3/5, and 3/5 for 3 feels real good. So this is one of those cards that has the ability to have a higher power ceiling in Constructed, but still be a playable card, even if you don't get those other ticks. And I think that's probably a well-balanced place for something like this to be. It could turn out that a 3/5 Sentinel on turn 3 is just ridiculous. That's a potential blowout card because you're forcing your opponent to have to be able to trade 2 or 3 to 1 to get through it. I don't think that's likely, but it feels very strong to me.
I would agree. It'll also depend on how powerful that Imperial trait is. I'm assuming that's going to be something around for a while, right? But this works with maximum firepower, so now you've got a guard that you can use to like also use as removal, which seems pretty cool. So I'll be curious to see how it works out. I think that's all the cards, the recent card previews that we were going to go through for today. So I think our last topic for today is listener questions. So we've got a slew of them, so I'll go through them and we can kind of rapid fire the answers and see what people think. So the first one goes along with our topic of uniqueness from Rebel Trader on Discord. What is the maximum number of allowable Vaders on the field at the same time for a game to call itself thematic? We'll go with Banana first in the questioning.
The correct answer is 8. 8 is the correct answer.
All right, Mr.
I think
Ben.
each person can have their own answer. Like, if more than one Vader is too many for you, that's fine. I would expect a lot of people to not agree with you, but that's fine too.
I would say I'm going to go with something around 8, but I would need to phone a friend. I want to go watch that Rogue One scene where Vader just like kills like 30 dudes at one time, and that's the number, right? So he can do that many strikes in one turn, and it's just him like overwhelming the battlefield. So then
I've
Theme will
changed
win.
my answer. Dan is objectively correct. Anybody who disagrees is incorrect.
All right, the next question is from Slip Capone. What game mechanic do you not want to see in Star Wars Unlimited?
Well, I know what Slip doesn't want to see, and that's discard. What don't I want to see? You know, generally speaking, there aren't a lot of game mechanics that I dislike. I think any game mechanic done well is a good game mechanic. So discard can be horrible if it's random and oppressive and all over the place, but one faction or a particular trait of characters within the Star Wars universe getting a discard mechanic, I think could be fun. I think mill mechanics can be fun. I guess my answer is the only mechanics I don't want to see in the game are ones that are poorly implemented.
Dirty mill players.
As a Mill Ashes player, I take offense to those noises. But I would agree with Ben. I would even say more than poorly implemented, anything that's oppressive. I think any game mechanic can be oppressive, right? If you could just discard someone's entire hand and force them into top deck mode, that is brutal. And sometimes that's because your opponent played poorly and, used too many cards early on, and sometimes it's because the cards are oppressive. If like a mechanic becomes that oppressive, whether it's control, removing all your units before you can play them, or discard, or mill, or anything like that, anything that's oppressive can really just like destroy a meta. So I hope that if we roll into a meta that becomes oppressive, they're quick to like correct and fix that. I'm appreciative of the fact that no matter how many playtesters FFG has, they probably can't know what the meta is going to be before it actually gets into the games or the hands of millions of people, right? The meta is going to change, and hopefully the sandbox that they've designed doesn't end up being an oppressive one. So anything that becomes oppressive, whether it's aggro, control, any of that stuff, is something that just makes me want to go play another game for a month, right? So
any mechanic that causes me to flip a coin to resolve an effect, I'm not a fan of. So no coin flipping, please.
Chance cubing. All right, there's another question from Slip Capone. My question, do you think that bases will have abilities other than health and deck aspect, or is that being saved for later sets? Seems like they answered their own question. I agree. I bet there will be abilities like that. It would be a waste of design space if there wasn't. I would be very upset. So I hope there is. I hope they don't just do like bases with 2 aspects and less health. That'd be really boring. So, any other thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely coming, right? I think I don't know if we'll see it the first set. That like it could be later design, right? First set I could definitely see. All right, you get a base for each faction, even though bases only provide you one aspect. Like having like Darth Vader being on Tatooine isn't going to happen because there's too much sand, right? So you don't want him to be defending Obi-Wan's hut, right? But so for the thematic reasons, I could see them doing multiple bases of the same aspect to kind of have like a good and a bad one. But I think there's a lot of open space there. You could have bases. I think you definitely, if you give them effects, you have to give them less health as a way to balance that out. But I think you could do stuff where the leader Krennic gives all damage units +1 attack power or something. Or you could give bases like an action or an epic action even. Like you could do, there's lots of room for you to do stuff with the base. So I think it's definitely going to come. I just, when it comes, we don't know.
I think it's unlikely to be set 1. Again, I agree with what everybody's saying. To kind of continue the riffing on ideas, you could have more health and no aspect. You could have more health and some other form of drawback. I would bet any amount of money that bases that do something other than just have hit points are on the near horizon. Like set 2, almost for sure, I would think, but definitely at some point.
What I would really love is if there are starter decks for this game for like all the sets, if future sets gave you like 3 different bases, like generic neutral base that says if this is your first time playing, use this base, and then other more advanced options. Like there's a starter deck coming out for One Piece where you pick a leader in that game, sort of like you do here, and it's a 50-card starter deck, but there's 4 or 3 different leaders to pick from. So you get to pick, like, the leader's going to completely change how you play with these 50 cards. They could do something similar with bases, right? So, all right, our next question is from the University of Radlands. They say, have you guys discussed the multiplayer PvP yet, or your idea of it? Or are you more excited for 1v1?
Well, I'm personally more excited for the 1v1 part of it. That's what I like, but I am excited to get into, so multiplayer could be fun if it's implemented right. They said they have multiplayer roles, we just haven't seen them yet, or they've play tested it. Like, it's been in mind from the beginning of the game. So I think doing like cool side events at other events with some multiplayer formats could be fun. I like the idea of like a team battle, like a 3v3, but it's not a like free-for-all type thing where it's like I play you, you play someone, right? Where there's 3 games going on and you have to win like 2 out of your 3 games and you kind of round robin it. I think stuff like that could be fun for like a team battle thing for the casual events.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that One Piece has these buddy battles coming up, and they're even doing like regionals and like big tournaments of buddy battles, which is pretty cool. They tried to do 2v2 in Star Wars LCG, and it was okay, but that was already a long game, and it became like an even longer game. So I wouldn't want it to slow the game down. I would love it if they had like some sort of thematic 2v2, right, where you each have your own ground arenas, like you're on adjacent planets, but you're sharing the space in between those 2 planets as a shared like space arena or something like that. But I'm excited to see what they come up with, especially for side events and casual play. My main play groups right now are 3 players and 5 players, so we'll be really excited if there's something for an odd number of players. But I'm expecting 1v1, 2v2, and maybe a free-for-all kind of thing.
We just gave our thoughts on the question about the 1v1 versus multiplayer. So if you want to give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I hope I don't just repeat everything you guys said that I missed, but in my heart of hearts, I'm a 1v1 card dueling guy. Like, peak gaming to me is a tight heads-up game against one other person where we're both dialed in. I love that. That said, I have a pretty diverse play group. We play multiplayer games, and team multiplayer stuff is definitely a way that I can get some of the more casual players in my play group to participate as well. So I'm excited for both, but I'm sure I'm going to spend more time with 1v1.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
All right. Well, we got 2 more questions for today. So Invader Grint asks, being able to hit the base directly, are aggro-style decks going to be strong, with very little room for combo? How
many Sentinels are we going to see? I mean, yes, the answer is any game where you can have attacker initiative and the defending player doesn't get to throw their dudes in the way to block. Aggro is always going to be a little bit stronger. That's true in Hearthstone. That's true in Versus. It's just true in any game with attacker initiative. So on some level, we have to have some faith that the playtest team and FFG have created the necessary mechanical backstops to not let aggro be oppressive, like you were talking about earlier, Dan. Because if they didn't, then yeah, aggro will be oppressive. But I think Sentinel, Shields, these are things that I think are going to be substantive enough speed bumps that we're not going to end up in a totally overrun aggro game state. Although we haven't seen enough cards yet to really know for sure, in my opinion.
And just in case someone's new to card games, what do you mean when you say attacker initiative?
Oh, okay. So there's two different ways that combat can work in card games. Magic, the game that did it first, had what I call blocker initiative. So when I'm the attacking player, I say, I'm going to attack with these 5 characters, and I put them forward. And then you, as the defending player, get to choose your units on your board and block in the most advantageous way for yourself. And in games like that, it can lead to the board stalling out a little bit because the attacker always has to do just a little bit better than the defender to actually punch through. In games with attacker initiative, I get to decide, okay, I'm going to attack with these guys, and I get to decide where they attack. In some games, you get to attack your opponent's units directly. In some games, you get to attack their health total or their base directly. Now, this play style can also go awry in the way we kind of just touched on, where decks that devote a lot of low-cost attack power to the board early can sometimes run players over before they even have a chance to get into the game. And that's not ideal either. So both styles of game have strengths and weaknesses. I tend to prefer attacker initiative.
I think every other game that has attacker initiative, though, does not have a shared turn sequence that I know of, right? So I think that, like, if you're playing a rush deck in this game where you play it, it comes in exhausted, but then I can respond. Like, you can't play all your things, right? And then just swarm me with 4 dudes at one time. You have there's room for interaction there to mitigate some of that. So I think some of the thought of aggression being, or aggro rush being oppressive, I think is somewhat already mitigated just by the way the turn structure works.
That's a really good point, Banana. I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
But I think we have to see that. We have to see more cards and see the game more to really know for sure.
Yeah,
because who knows? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we need to see the game in action, right? You finish. You go.
Let's say maybe we see some weird mechanic where you can have 30 cards come in ready. Then.
Yeah.
We have a problem.
Yeah, I think we really need to see the game in action, right? I think that aggro has a place in every meta, and it depends on what you mean by aggro. Aggro could mean swarming units to the board, and there can be counters to that, right? AoE and things like that. Aggro could mean playing a high attack unit or high power unit on curve every turn and just constantly putting threats down and swinging at face. I'm an aggro player in almost every game I play. There are definitely decks that can take me down in all of those games. It just comes to matchup and skill a little bit, right? So I think that aggro will be strong, and I think that in games with defender initiative, aggro can actually be stifled quite a bit by it. But I don't think, especially like Banana said with the turn sequence, that aggro decks, especially not being able to attack that first turn and things like that, they've got a lot of hurdles already to get over. I think they're just going to be in the mix of the meta. But once we've played the game, we'll know better. All right. Wampa Radio, our last question for today, says, in Star Wars CCG, it took 9 set releases before we finally saw an Emperor Palpatine card. What character or ship deserves this kind of tension and build-up in Star Wars Unlimited?
So I kind of answered this already on Twitter. Like when they asked it, I responded on our podcast account. But the only correct answer I am willing to accept is Babu Frick. So Babu Frick was my answer. So
Man, that's a really hard needle to thread because you want to pick a character that's like a marquee name. Like Palpatine's a really, really big deal. So holding him back does build it up. But on the other hand, I want the game to survive and like be successful. And printing marquee characters is a way to. So I'm trying to think who's a character that we could be willing to hold back, but it isn't like running a risk to hold them back. Man, Dan, I'm going to kick it to you. I need another second to think.
Well, it's not going to be Emperor Palpatine, it looks like, because we just read through the Royal Guard. So I'll cross that off my list. I think the right thing to do would be to, like, take a stance on this. We have unlimited access to all of Star Wars, right? It looks like we're seeing a lot of classic trilogy stuff in this first set. Hopefully we get to explore the prequels and the sequels and things like that. But if they waited like 5 or 6 sets in and gave like little hints that they were going to go into Legends characters, and then like set 7 was just like Dash Rendar's the first preview card, people would be like, what? You're bringing all the old stuff that I loved back in, right? If they showed like, can't remember what his ship type is. Banana talked about it earlier, right? But his ship type, but not the named ship. And then they show some other things from his stories, and then they lay it down in like a future set that like, hey, we're going into the Legends content for a cycle. People would go wild, right? So that would be cool.
Like if they named a set Shadows of the Empire, right? Like, or like the Old Republic, right? Like.
Yeah, something like that.
If you have like Darth Revan as like your set 9, like big boss monster, that'd be pretty wild.
What was Chewbacca's little brother's name in the Christmas special? Was that like Whoopi
holiday
or
special
whatever?
set? That's what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, that's all in on holiday set.
Life Day set or something.
It'll have silver borders though.
Now this is pod racing.
I'd be okay if they kept off pod racers for a while, and then they just dropped it in for a whole set mechanic. I'd be happy.
Hopefully it works. Cool. So they like, I don't know if you were playing Destiny at the time when they introduced pod racers into Star Wars Destiny. Yeah. So you know about the Boonta Eve classic, like it never really worked. I kind of don't even remember how it worked anymore. I'm gonna have to look it up.
And I think that's all our topics for today. We made it through a little bit over an hour. Sorry, everybody, but we did it. Any closing remarks? I'm going to be out of town for a couple of weeks, but I will be recording some stuff at Gen Con if I can figure out how to do that. As a technology inept person, that might be difficult, but we'll try.
I have faith in you, man. You can do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams.
I find your faith disturbing. No.
Yeah, that would have been the right time for it.
I only have one thing I want to say.
This party's over.
All right. Until next time, we'll see you in the arenas.